Thanks for having me back. It was only, how old am I now? 31? 16 years ago, I used to DJ in this very room, the school dances that we had. So it's nice to be back, and thanks for having me. So today I want to talk a little bit about satisfaction and success at work. I believe that three key ingredients to really living a fulfilling life is to have passion, self-motivation, and self-trust, and those are the keys to unlocking happiness in both your personal and professional life. Okay, so the mission today is to discuss the following things. First of all, how to identify your passion, how to identify your character strengths, mastering specific skills, how to apply those things to the workplace, and how to achieve a supreme orgasmic state of happiness and satisfaction by attaining fulfillment and financial success at work. Once you've confidently mastered skills related to your strengths, you can apply them to the entire business world. For me, this led to an extremely high quality of life, both in fulfillment at work and financial success. Identifying your passion will naturally lead to self-motivation. You will learn to do well, gain confidence in your field, and others will also notice. It's up to you to trust in yourself and overcome fear, but if you can apply your knowledge to make things connect, you'll be very successful. So most people spend a minimum of 5 days a week at work, and this is how the day is typically broken up into thirds. So you'll do 8 hours working at the office, 8 hours sleeping, and 8 hours in transit or eating or being with your family, waking up, winding down, etc. So we're not going to focus on the second and third elements. We're just going to focus on the first one and how you can really maximize the amount of fulfillment you have at work and financial success at work. This also, I just want to preface by, this talk is pretty much geared more toward those of you who are current Milken students or university students. There's certainly facets of this talk that can be applied to all different people at all different stages of life and in your career, but certainly was helpful for me, and my story will help identify people who are in high school and college as to defining your path. So there are 4 scenarios. As a manager in the music industry, I typically gauge how well I'm doing with a client by assessing where in these 4 scenarios my clients are at. So the first one is if the client is financially successful but not creatively fulfilled. This will lead to a kind of above average scenario where the client will be okay because they're making money, but they might not. It might not be a lasting success because they're not going to feel spiritually fulfilled with what they're doing. The second scenario is creatively fulfilled but not financially successful, which is like path to destruction, which is also short-term happiness because ultimately they won't be able to support themselves. The third scenario is not creatively fulfilled or financially successful, and I call that headed for meltdown, which means that you're going to get fired real quick as a manager if you're not able to do something, at least get into one of the first 2 scenarios to keep your client's career afloat. And the fourth one is creatively fulfilled, financially successful, aka the orgasmic state of satisfaction. I say this because really there could be nothing more fulfilling than doing what you're passionate about and making money at it too. Certainly money is not, I don't want people to equate necessarily money to, or making money to, for instance, being greedy, but it is definitely an indication that you are doing well, that you're in demand in your field, that you've mastered certain tasks and that, or mastered certain skills, and that people's motivation to make money can be for various things. For instance, you could want to be a billionaire to donate billions to charity, so it's not necessarily for the motivation of greed, although it can be used for that. So our goal is to achieve scenario number 4, to have fulfillment in your work and personal satisfaction at work, but also to make money at the same time. So wise words that I'm taught in songwriting is that you cannot polish a turd, and what that means is that if you're starting with a bad idea or if you're not starting with the right idea, you're most likely not going to end up with an incredible result. To cut to the chase, this phrase essentially means that if you are not focused on the right passion in life or applying it to work, then you're ultimately not going to be fully fulfilled because you're going to be missing some sort of fulfillment in what it is that you exactly want to. And you may make money, but you might not be happy because you're not satisfying a creative goal for yourself or a personal goal for yourself. And I'll speak a little bit more on that right now. So, first you must start with an amazing idea and build on it. And this is with regards to songwriting. First you start with an amazing idea and you build on it. Secondly, it's not worth fleshing out and developing an idea that is flawed because it just won't help you achieve scenario number 4, which is our goal. Next, you need to spend time finding the core great idea, building on it, and refining it and adapting it over time. You want to identify the central concept or idea of your song and make sure that you're bringing it to light in the most effective way possible. To give you an example of how this applies to my life, I thought I was always passionate about music, so I built my life around it for 9 years in the industry. And then I realized that my passion is just to be creative, and I'm going to revisit this shortly. But my passion is not only restricted to the creation of music. Now I have a passion for fashion, design of accessories, like iPhone cases, etc. But that took a lot of time for me to go through and refine and refine and refine over my process in order to get there. But in the 9 years that I've been working, I've mastered my core passion and dug deeper and deeper over time to reveal my larger passion, which isn't just necessarily music, but it's being creative. But if I did not start with one core strong idea, I would have never been able to get to this level of happiness. So, things take time. So I'm going to go through a quick timeline of my life. So at 7 years old, I decided that I liked music. I started playing piano. Actually, I should start, in 1989, I started playing piano. And in 1990, I gave up piano and started playing drums. Piano was too hard for me, and I wasn't able to really play with 2 hands, so I kind of stopped that once I got to the 2 hands. At 10 years old in 1993, I decided that I was, what was it? What happened in 1993 that I was so passionate about? Oh yes, in 1993, I decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was selling a lot of basketball cards and stuff to my fellow students and friends, whether it was in camp or in school or whatever. In 1996, I decided that I liked DJing. It was 1998, when I was 15 years old, I actually started DJing. I used my bar mitzvah money to buy a DJ system. At 18 years old, I decided that I wanted to produce music, and it was at 19 years old that I decided that I wanted to be a manager. And it was at 20 years old that, at 18 years old, I expanded into making music, that's correct, but at 19 years old, I realized that my mission statement in life was that I wanted to make a stamp on popular culture. And I'm going to explain that in just a second. That happened in my sophomore year of college. At 20 years old, in 2003, I decided I definitely wanted to work in the music business, and at 20 years old, I also started doing management in A&R while doing 4 different internships throughout college. I graduated college in 2005, and at the age of 22, I started interning again all over, against the request of my USC career department, who told me that I had done enough internships. I still decided to start from the bottom and intern at Atlantic Records. I had my first minor local hit at 24 years old, and I had my first major hit at 25 years old, which was a #1 record for Enrique Iglesias, and my first major promotion at 26 years old. At 28 years old, I became the president of my company, having risen from an intern, and here I am at 31 years old. But doing this entire thing was a very long passion of refinement. I would have never guessed at 7 years old when I picked up some drumsticks that, hey, I'm going to end up working with some of the biggest stars in the world. In fact, that really became my mission statement at 20 years old. So as you can see, it took 13 years for me to get to that point, and it took about another 11 years for it to manifest itself in actually a song that millions of people have loved, etc. I should give you a little bit of a background. The artists that I've worked with and had hits with include David Guetta, the song Titanium. I was in the room with Sia when she made that song. Tonight I'm Loving You by Enrique Iglesias. We got nominated for David Guetta's album for the Titanium song. Wild Ones by Flo Rida was also a Grammy-nominated song. Tons and tons of other big records by artists like Pitbull, Chris Brown, Sia, etc., etc. The point is that at some point it hit a critical mass, and I was like, wow, okay, so now I know that I'm really passionate about this. Where was the crossroads that I decided that I wanted to actually take a stand and not take on the traditional path? My family is a very academic family. My uncle is here, who's also a very accomplished dentist, and I have several other members of my family who I respect very much, and thank you guys for coming. However, I'm the first one in my family to probably not do something academic and to do something creative, and that was a little bit uncomfortable for my family to accept at the time. But there was a certain point where I was doing my refinement of my passion in college where I decided essentially that, hey, I've hit a wall here. I need to rethink my life. I was essentially in, sorry, that's the next slide. I was in scenario number 3. I was in meltdown mode. So it was the sophomore year of USC. I had done a year and a half of business school at USC, or a business major, and finance and accounting were like Chinese to me. I really did not understand what was going on. It's not that I had any, shortage of brain power or I wasn't intelligent. It was just more that I truly, genuinely wasn't interested. Now, of course, I've had to understand those topics and learn them to, lead my life. But at the time, it was just something that I was so completely uninterested in. And I had a talk with my father, who's a big academic. In fact, he's a professor at UCLA. And I got a response from him that I really wouldn't have expected, which was essentially that, Ben, you can do whatever you want in life. You can be a janitor, but if you're going to be a janitor, you have to be the best janitor in the world. And that was really advice that changed my life. And it was very unexpected coming from my father, because someone who is a very well-respected academic, I would have expected him to say something like, study harder or try harder. But instead, he just said, follow your passion, follow your heart. And the funny thing is that he said that he went into medicine and science because he had a passion for medicine and science and cardiology, not because anyone told him to or not because it was the right thing to do. He just loved what he did. And that was the fuel that guided him to become one of the best cardiologists in the world. And he told me to follow the same path. And that was extremely life-changing advice for me. I felt like a huge weight was lifted off of my shoulders, and I was able to really redirect my life and my goal in life. But everything starts with passion for something. So, how to identify passion? So, to some people this comes naturally, and to some people it doesn't come naturally. I've had people come to me and say, hey, I have no clue what I'm passionate about. To me, I knew from an early age I was passionate about being an entrepreneur or working in music. In fact, I've mentioned that I was a DJ here in this very room, so clearly I was DJing and making money doing it, 15, 16 years ago. And I don't think it's a coincidence that, 16 years later, I'm representing one of the top DJs in the world, David Guetta. I think it's just the progression of following your passion, mastering your skill, and other people seeing that and wanting them to work with you, or wanting you to work with them. But if you're not clear on identifying your passion, here's some steps that can help. First, experiencing a rush of childlike excitement or curiosity. Second, a magnetism toward a particular activity, object, or behavior. An obsession or possible addiction to this behavior, which some people have and some people don't. And the last thing is ask yourself, would you do this for free? Going back to the rush of childlike, I'll talk to you a little bit more about the obsession or addiction. So when I started DJing at the age of 15, I would go home after school and DJ from like 4 o'clock till 10 o'clock. I spent 6 hours just playing on my DJ system, mixing songs together. In fact, my dad would stand behind me. He told me later that he would stand behind me for like 30 minutes and I wouldn't even like lift my head up to see what else was going on. I was so obsessed with being able to mix records together. And there are several things in my life that I've actually taken that approach to. But can you do something? Can you get lost in it for weeks, hours, months, years? Is it something that you're that passionate about that you feel like you can do on end without burning out, essentially? I remember when I started to get into whiskey. I'm certainly not a heavy drinker, but I do appreciate fine spirits. I'm allergic to wine. My father actually is a wine specialist, so I decided to learn a little bit more about whiskey. And I remember when I started learning about whiskey, I started learning about all the different brands of whiskey and where it was made, and the different flavors and the different styles and single malts and blends and this, that, and the other. And I really decided at that point when I was doing this research, like, hey, I have a real passion for this. And I started comparing things and trying things and getting to know more. That doesn't mean I should go work in the whiskey business, but it certainly means that I had a passion for it and this kind of idea of riding this high of like wanting to know more about it was certainly coming from an innate passion that I had to learn more. Same thing with fashion. I used to dress horribly. Fortunately, my wife, when we got married, changed up my style a little bit. And I started to look more into fashion and learn more about different sorts of brands that were out there. And again, I found the same thing, spending hours online researching, finding out different stores, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I can say that I have a passion for fashion I didn't have before, and it wasn't apparent and obvious to me in the beginning. But through doing a series of different activities, I was able to help refine and identify exactly what that is. Second thing is, so do you want to know everything about it? So I would find myself, again, doing research on the internet, asking. If it was whiskey, I was asking bartenders. If it was music, I was asking other DJs. Or I was looking on blogs online. My little daughter's making a little bit of noise, so she's going to step out right now. And if it was, for instance, when I was going to propose to my wife, I needed to buy a diamond, and I found myself getting incredibly obsessed with buying the right thing, doing the right research, finding the right people, knowing the market in and out, up and down. I did the exact same thing when I was buying a house. Something that was really important to me, if something was really important to me, I'd become very passionate about it, and I would leave no stone unturned. So you can basically identify if you're passionate about something by really obsessing in it and really learning everything about it. So the next thing I'm going to talk about, is I guess, if it's not always obvious, you'll see that the curiosity of what it is that you're talking about or what it is that you might be interested will linger. For instance, what's a good example? I was always interested in design of accessories, always. I don't know why it is, but when I was a kid, I would always be obsessed with wallets and watches and this, that, and the other. And once I had the amenity to have some graphic designers on my team and a little bit of free time on the weekends, I started saying, hey, I want to design a watch. Do I know anything about watches? The basics, basic horology. I certainly am not a master of, of watches, but at least there was a curiosity there. And I spent time and I spent weeks and I did design a watch. And ultimately, I'm not going to produce that watch, and I'm not going to go into the watch business because I'm not really that passionate to see this whole thing through all the way till the end. But at least I tested it a little bit to see whether I was that interested in it. And so I spent the time researching to see if it sticks, and ultimately it didn't. I realized at the end of the day, I'll probably just rather buy a watch made by somebody else instead of one that I've designed on my own. One major thing is that when you're pursuing a particular activity, does it feel like you're at home? Does it feel like it's your domain? Does it feel like it's your space? I can say that after having interned at several different places, the first day that I spent at Atlantic Records, I said, I'm home. I was waiting to hear back from law schools. I was going to be a music lawyer, and my parents gave me a 6-month deadline that I could work at Atlantic Records as an intern, and if I got a job, I could continue. And day one, I was at home. I knew it. I knew I was around music producers and artists and songwriters and in the studio and this, that, and the other, and it felt exactly like where I needed to be. And if you get that kind of feeling while you're pursuing one of your passions or something you feel like you might be passionate about, that's a strong indication that this is what you should be doing. And I would have never guessed that I would be working with who I'm working with today, or having such a strong passion, for instance, for songwriters today. But I didn't find that out the first day. I mean, that was years and years and years and years and years of work. And in every year, I would reassess. I would dig deeper and deeper. What is it that I really like about what I'm doing? How can I hone in more on that? How can I become more an expert on that particular topic of songwriting or music production? And I ultimately dug deep and constantly evaluated myself. And now I'm very close, and I've worked with the biggest music producers in the entire world, the biggest songwriters in the entire world. I don't think that it's a mistake. I just every year assessed what it was I liked about what I was doing, and I realized it wasn't the glamour of the music industry that appealed to me, it was the creation of the songs. And so when I found out that it was the creation of the songs, I started going to the source. I started becoming friends with those who were creating and kind of helped deliver for them until I moved up the chain, until I started working with the best in the world, and they requested to work with me, which was a nice feeling. Let's see. So self-motivation. So this is a simple one. It's a part of the title of the presentation, but truthfully, if you're really dead set and passionate about something, you're just going to be self-motivated to do it, period. It's that simple. You're not going to have to be pushed to do something that you love. That's it. That's the end. We're moving on to the next topic in the conversation now. Trusting yourself. So the biggest enemy to trusting yourself is fear. Actually, no, for 1 second, I'm going to go back to self-motivation. What I'm going to say is that there's stuff that I studied that I cared about in school, and there's stuff that I studied that I didn't care about in school. The difference in how I performed didn't have to do whether the material was easy or hard, but really how much I cared about it, how much it resonated with me. Whether I found it interesting or not was really what was the determining factor as to whether I did well in the class or not. There's certainly easy classes that I didn't do well in, or easy classes that I didn't do well in, and there were very, very difficult and complex analytical classes that I did well in because I found it engaging. So once you can really understand what you're passionate about, you'll be able to discuss, analyze, and refine it, and then work on it for hours, weeks, months, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you really do love something, you shouldn't have to push yourself, like I said a few minutes ago, but you should also be very excited to do it. And the more successful you get, the less it becomes about the money. This is an interesting fact. And the more it becomes about achieving the goals that you want. And many people learn that way too late in life. So you'll see people in their 50s and 60s trying to achieve their true passions and goals in life when they realize, hey, it's not really about the money. I've made the money now. It's really about seeking out something else. But imagine if you can make the money and you can have that personal fulfillment or work fulfillment much earlier in your life. At the age of 28, I found this type of happiness and bliss and success. And I certainly have a long way to go, but I have a very, very high quality of life. When I talk to people, I couldn't be happier. I'm doing what I love. I'm making money doing it. I'm able to support a family, my wife, my daughter, buy a house, et cetera, and achieve all my life goals, give back to charity, et cetera. And I want, all I could ask is that whoever really wants to have a very, very high quality of life, I highly recommend doing something very similar. So moving on to the next topic of trusting yourself. So the biggest enemy to trusting yourself is fear. Fear is a naturally occurring phenomenon. Not all fear is bad, and fear is poisonous when it prevents you from living out who you really are or want to be and achieving specific goals that you set for yourself. So fear is a naturally occurring phenomenon that manifests itself often as an emotion to signal protection. For instance, if you hear a lion roar, you'll get scared, and that's often to protect yourself physically. So in some instances, particularly non-physically threatening instances, fear can actually be one of the most poisonous phenomena that stunt development, growth, success, and happiness. Not all fear is bad. A fear of walking down a dark alley or a fear of getting bitten by a snake or falling off of a cliff, those are all pretty healthy fears because they protect you from physical harm. But fear becomes bad or poisonous when it manifests itself in the form of obstacles to you living out who you really are or want to be, or living out what it is that you truly want to do. So when fear gets in the way, when you start getting worried about what will people think, or what will I do, or that's when fear starts to impede on you achieving your own personal happiness. So for instance, here are the various manifestations of fear. A fear of expressing yourself, a fear of asking for what it is that you really want, or a fear of being direct with people, fear of failure, and a fear of hurting others. I've been guilty of all four of these forms of fear in my life. Fear of expressing yourself. If you're not clear about, for instance, if if there's a certain type of music that you like, or even for a young student in high school or college that's in the closet and is afraid to come out to their peers, that can really weigh on their conscience. Only they can decide when it's the right time. But if you're not able to live out your true self, you'll feel like you're going to be hiding something and you're suppressing something, and you won't be truly happy because you feel like you're not really representing and reflecting yourself properly in society. There's a fear of asking what you really want, or a fear of being direct. I had this very crippling fear, and it was very bad. I would go into a lot of meetings, and it was actually a client of mine that told me, once the person had stepped out of the room, say exactly what it is that you want. And I thought to myself, wow, maybe if I do that, then I'll actually get what I want. So you can't get what you want if you don't put it out there in the world to begin with. And being direct and being clear about what it is that you really want helps set the agenda for other people to help give you what it is that you really want. Fear of failure. I was always so afraid of putting out a project that failed until I realized that it's a numbers game. You can't win on every single thing that you do. You can only try to maximize and win on as many things as that you put out there into the world. And now sometimes there's songs that I put out there that I don't, with zero expectations. I hope this does well. I've done my best. I've really put in all the effort. I've really analyzed this, and and we're going to put the right amount of promotion into it. Hopefully it takes off. If it doesn't, you can't be afraid to fail. You can't not put stuff out there into the universe. to be honest with you, there's a song like Titanium, which I'm sure most of you know. I had no clue as to whether that song was going to be good or not. I knew it was good. I didn't know whether it was going to be a hit record or not. And especially in the marketplace when we came out with the song, it wasn't a very popular style of song to come out with. But if we had been afraid to promote that song out of fear of failure, you know, who knows? That song, people have come up to me and told me that that song's changed their lives. And if we were afraid to put it out, then maybe we wouldn't be in the same place today, or I wouldn't be in the same place today. Or fear of hurting others. So there's one thing about interpersonal relationships and feeling like, oh, well, not telling them to not ruffle feathers is going to be better for your relationship with them. But I find the opposite. If you can clearly articulate yourself and tell others, whether it's a boss or whether it's a significant other, that, you know, and I find a very articulate and gentle way of communicating your feelings, you'll find that you create stronger bonds and strengthen your relationships with them, and you'll get much, much more out of your relationships with them. So the keys to overcoming fear are passion and self-confidence. So think about a singer who's going on stage. You know, an amateur singer that's going on stage might be, you know, frightened to go and perform in front of people, kind of like I am right now. But it's the passion that they have for wanting to sing that helps them get over that fear. And ultimately, the formula would be that the foundation is passion, but passion plus the time, plus the self-assessment and refinement equals mastery of something. And that mastery of a particular task or skill leads to self-confidence. So you could also say that I won't be scared of coming on stage if I know that I'm going to kill it, right? So the two keys to overcoming your fear are passion and self-confidence. But you can really only reach that self-confidence if you put in those hours, or as Malcolm Gladwell would say, those 10,000 hours to becoming a master at a particular skill. Let's see where we're at right now. So success is contagious, both in your personal life and in your work life. If you do well, if you have a hit record, in my case, or if you've, you know, done a great deal or made somebody a whole bunch of money, you better believe that other people are going to call and say, hey, I want you to do the same thing for me that you did for someone else. And I've had that happen with numerous artists where, hey, you did this hit for Flo Rida, I need you to do a hit for me for my album. And it's the same kind of phenomenon that happens when you say that if someone like puts out positive energy into the world, that's what they're going to receive back. And the exact inverse idea of people who are negative start to alienate themselves. So if you're able to achieve this kind of success in work, it's only going to exponentially increase. And the same thing, if you're able to cut, for instance, bad people out of your life, or repair relationships to an effective degree, and to, you know, be really direct and honest with those around you and build very meaningful, strong relationships, you're going to find that you're a lot more personally satisfied. And you're going to start to also attract positive, happy, magnetic people to you, and it's going to only increase the quality of your life in the end. I guess that's pretty much it. I just wanted to say that it's, you know, been a pleasure coming back here to Milken. I also wanted to apologize for the overuse of the word orgasmic earlier on in the presentation. It's been a pleasure, and you know, talking about my experiences, I'm obviously one of very many people who have had the fortune to come speak here, but more that you know, sharing my experience has been very enlightening, and actually caused me to do a lot of self-assessment while I was going through this entire process. So I appreciate it, and thank you very much. Have a wonderful afternoon.